Lewis Hamilton is done staying quiet, and what's happening between him and the FIA right now is turning into one of the biggest storylines of the entire 2026 Formula One season. Because in just 3 race weekends, the 7-time world champion has been hit with 4 separate penalties. And if you think that's just bad luck, wait until you hear what he actually said about it. Because this isn't some throwaway comment. This is a driver who is clearly fed up, clearly frustrated, and clearly starting to feel like the FIA has a target on his back. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why the paddock is calling this the most dramatic stretch of Hamilton's Ferrari career so far. So let's start at the beginning, because this didn't come out of nowhere. It started at the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, Hamilton's home race, the one place where every single fan in the crowd wants to see him on the podium. And he was flying. He made an incredible start, he was right in the mix. And then the news broke. The stewards were investigating him for a false start. Ferrari immediately pushed back, insisting their own sensors showed no significant movement on the grid, but the stewards disagreed, ruling that Hamilton had moved on the 3rd of 5 red lights, and slapped him with a 5-second time penalty. Team boss Fred Vasseur came out afterward and called it harsh, arguing the data simply didn't support the decision, but the penalty stood, dropping Hamilton from 2nd to 3rd at the finish. And if that was the end of it, this would just be a normal, forgettable steward's decision. But it wasn't the end of it, because the very same race weekend, the FIA opened up a second investigation into Hamilton, this time for allegedly failing to slow down enough under yellow flag conditions. Now think about that for a second. 2 separate investigations, in the same race, against the same driver. Fans online started asking the same question. Is Formula One's stewarding system suddenly zeroing in on Lewis Hamilton? The FIA eventually cleared him on the yellow flag charge, handing him a reprimand instead of a harsher punishment, which meant he held onto his podium, but the damage to the narrative was already done. Hamilton had just survived 2 FIA investigations in one weekend, and the season was only getting started. Then came Spa, the Belgian Grand Prix, one of the most iconic and demanding circuits on the calendar, and this is where things got genuinely chaotic. On the very first lap, at the high-speed Les Combes complex, Hamilton made contact with his former Mercedes teammate George Russell, sending Russell spinning into the gravel and effectively ending his race before it had even really begun. The stewards moved fast, handing Hamilton a 5-second penalty for his role in the incident, and Hamilton finished the race down in 4th place, more than 15 seconds behind his own teammate Charles Leclerc, who was fighting at the front for the win. But here's where it gets interesting, because behind the scenes, team radio that wasn't broadcast live during the race later surfaced, and it revealed Hamilton furiously insisting to his race engineer that he had been in an impossible position, that the other car had crossed over directly in front of him, that this wasn't reckless driving, this was a racing incident that could have gone either way. And the wildest part? George Russell, the very driver Hamilton hit, publicly agreed with him. Russell, who also happens to be a director of the Grand Prix Drivers Association, told reporters after the race that he didn't think Hamilton had done anything reckless, calling it simply one of those things that happens in racing. So you have the driver who got taken out, publicly defending the driver who took him out, while the FIA still issued the penalty anyway. That's the kind of contradiction that gets a paddock talking. But Spa wasn't finished delivering drama, because later in the race, during a pit stop under a virtual safety car, one of Hamilton's mechanics was involved in a scary moment during an unsafe release, with Hamilton's car making contact with the crew member as he pulled away. The FIA stewards looked into it, and here's the part that really got people questioning the FIA's consistency. They chose to fine Ferrari the team, not Hamilton the driver, and when journalists pushed the FIA to explain exactly why they handled it that way, instead of following the usual guidelines for these situations, the FIA simply refused to give a clear answer. No transparency, no detailed explanation, just silence. For a governing body that prides itself on rules and process, that kind of silence speaks volumes, and it fed directly into a growing perception that something inconsistent, maybe even unfair, was happening around Hamilton's penalties that season. And it was after this stretch of races, Silverstone, then Spa, that Planet F1 reported something that really raised eyebrows: Hamilton's controversial 5-second penalty from Spa, along with the FIA's decision not to punish his own teammate Charles Leclerc for a separate collision with Oscar Piastri on the same track, was going to be placed directly on the agenda for a formal meeting between the drivers and the FIA, scheduled ahead of the next race weekend in Budapest for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Think about the significance of that for a second. This wasn't just fans complaining on social media anymore. This wasn't just pundits arguing on a podcast. This was serious enough, contested enough, that it was heading into an official meeting room between the sport's governing body and its drivers, with Hamilton's situation as one of the headline topics. So heading into Hungary, all eyes were on how the FIA would treat Hamilton this time, whether the meeting would change anything, whether there would be some kind of reset. And then Hungary happened, and it somehow got even messier. During qualifying, Hamilton was on what looked like a genuinely strong lap, fighting for pole position against Lando Norris, when he suddenly found himself impeding Oscar Piastri's McLaren, who was on his own flying lap in the closing moments of Q3. Hamilton later explained exactly what happened. He said he'd just completed a fast lap of his own and didn't get the radio message warning him that Piastri was closing in until the McLaren was already right on top of him. In Hamilton's own words, describing the whole session, he said Norris did the job and set a great lap, and he simply didn't on his final attempt, adding that he didn't understand why Ferrari sent him out first for that final run, calling it a shock, and admitting flatly that the car clearly had the pace for pole and he just didn't deliver it. That's raw honesty from a 7-time champion, but honesty didn't save him from the stewards. They summoned both Hamilton and Piastri, along with representatives from Ferrari and McLaren, and after reviewing the video, the telemetry, and the team radio, they handed Hamilton a 3-place grid penalty, dropping him from 2nd all the way down to 5th on the starting grid for the Hungarian Grand Prix, while Leclerc got bumped up to the front row instead. 3 separate incidents, 3 separate penalties, all within the same 2 or 3 race weekends. And then, just when it looked like the storm might finally be settling, Hamilton got hit again, this time during the actual Hungarian Grand Prix itself, for exceeding the pit lane speed limit. And get this, he wasn't going fast, he wasn't reckless, he broke the limit by just 0.1 kilometers per hour. 0.1, a number so small it's almost impossible to even perceive as a driver behind the wheel. But the FIA didn't care about the margin. A breach is a breach, and Hamilton was slapped with a 5-second penalty that dropped him from 4th on the road down to 5th in the final classification, behind his own teammate Charles Leclerc yet again. That was Hamilton's 4th sanction in just 3 race weekends. 4. Silverstone false start. Spa collision with Russell. Hungary grid drop for impeding Piastri. And now, Hungary pit lane speeding by 1/100th of a kilometer per hour. And this time, Hamilton didn't hold back on team radio. The moment he was informed of the pit lane penalty, he came on the radio and said it flat out. They're handing out penalties like crazy. Not exactly the explosive meltdown headline promises might suggest, but make no mistake, that line was Hamilton publicly signaling, in real time, mid-race, that he believed the stewards had gone too far. And then, just after crossing the finish line, he doubled down, adding another pointed comment referencing the exact same frustration, driving the point home that this wasn't a one-off complaint. This was a pattern he was calling out on purpose. And then, after the race, when reporters got him in front of a microphone, Hamilton said something that cuts right to the heart of this entire saga. He admitted that he has to stop giving the FIA stewards, in his own words, any reason to penalize him, acknowledging that these sanctions have already cost him a lot of championship points this season. But, and this is the twist that changes how you should read this whole story, Hamilton also revealed something that complicates the simple "FIA is out to get me" narrative, because he confirmed that he had actually argued his Silverstone false start penalty behind the scenes, and the FIA agreed with his protest. Let that sink in. And the same governing body that fans are accusing of unfairly targeting him actually sided with him when he pushed back on one of these calls. So what's really going on here? Is this a genuine pattern of a driver being unfairly scrutinized race after race, penalty after penalty, in a way that's costing him a real shot at fighting for the championship? Or is this simply what happens when a seven-time world champion, now in his 40s, racing for a new team in a rebuilt car, is pushing every single limit trying to find pace, and inevitably crossing the line more often because he's driving on the ragged edge? The honest answer is probably somewhere in between, and that's exactly what makes this such a fascinating storyline to follow, because you have Hamilton himself, in his own words, both criticizing the stewards for handing out penalties like crazy, and admitting he needs to stop giving them a reason to do it. Two things that can both be true at the same time. You have Fred Vasseur calling one of the penalties harsh and disputing the sensor data. You have George Russell, the driver Hamilton literally crashed into, publicly defending him instead of criticizing him. You have the FIA choosing to fine the team instead of the driver for the mechanic incident at Spa, then refusing to explain why. And you have all of this serious enough, contested enough, that it triggered a formal sit-down meeting between the FIA and the drivers in Budapest to address exactly these kinds of controversial calls. This is bigger than one bad weekend. This is a full-blown pattern that's shaping the entire second half of Hamilton's 2026 season. It's shaping Ferrari's championship hopes, and it's raising real questions about consistency inside race control that other drivers and teams are clearly starting to notice too. So here's the question I want you to sit with. With 4 penalties in 3 weekends, a formal FIA meeting already on the calendar, and Hamilton himself publicly admitting the sanctions are costing him serious points, is this the moment his championship challenge quietly slips away? Or is this the exact kind of adversity a 7-time champion has built his entire career on fighting back against? Drop your take in the comments right now. Tell me if you think the FIA has been fair to Hamilton or not. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss how this saga unfolds at the next race weekend. And give this video a like if you want more no-nonsense breakdowns of everything going on behind the scenes in Formula One this season. Because trust me, this story is far from over.